You guys can feel free to talk amongst yourselves and do whatever the freak you need to do. Wait for Destiny's here now. We're just waiting on Kai. We got a pretty decent ratio today, right? Like a female to male ratio.
Yeah.
Pretty uncommon.
Lots of women.
Yeah, you're normally always begging for dudes. I mean, begging for females. Got lucky.
Toph, I really like the polka dot shirt on you. I don't know if she can hear me. Oh, she's not in this channel yet. Never mind. I'll compliment her in 2 seconds.
I'm in.
Kai Clips, can you join the what is it? The StreamYard?
Toph, we weren't in the Discord, but I was saying you have a very cute top. I like the polka dot top.
I like this top too.
It's really cute on you. Yeah, it looks really good with like your hair color, actually. Yeah, it's a good combo.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, good vibe.
Hopefully my stream puts up with this. Might brick it, who knows?
Typically people just, because you don't need to do your video on Discord.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, you just turn the video off. Yeah, and you just turn the video on Discord. I mean on StreamYard.
There we go. I think we're good to go, guys. Perfect.
Is Anna not in the Discord? Too far beyond schedule. You not know? Hey Anna, we need you to come into the Discord, please.
What? Can you explain to me again? I always ask every random fuck show host why they do this. Why do you do you use StreamYard? Why don't you just use Discord video? Why separate over two things?
I think StreamYard was better for capturing purposes, I guess, for some reason. And then I don't know, like that was just like the way that everyone did it, and so then I just did it the exact same way. And then by that point, I ended up like paying for a year of StreamYard because it was just more financially. You save money by doing it annually, and so then I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and use this thing because I already paid money for it.
That's bullshit, but okay.
I mean, that's all I can give you.
Bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah, terrible reason. Unbelievable.
Where the freak is Anna? What's she doing?
I think StreamYards has names as well. That might be a big part of it.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing too. And then StreamYard, it was easier to manipulate, to put like who goes in what area and what row and all that stuff.
Also, hello, friends.
Hello, Stardust.
How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
There we go. Anna joined. So you know what? Go ahead and decline. Hit that decline. Hit yes. I'm in the middle of a raid in Lost Ark.
Are you serious? The start time is 4 minutes ago. How are you in the middle of a raid?
No, I didn't think it would take that long because I didn't expect this to fail. But it's fine. Don't worry.
Lost Ark, isn't that supposed to be the WoW killer?
Fanatiq.
I don't know if it's gonna be no WoW killer. It's a good game though. It's actually particularly good in my opinion. Like, I think it's insane. I think the boss fight mechanics are like literally some of the best in like ever created.
Ever created. Wow.
Yeah, I would say so, man.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, thank you guys for being part of another Fanatic panel. I like took the time to speak to every new person about like what's expected in the panel and like what the goal is, and I'm glad that everybody's here and able to oblige. I didn't have the personal conversation with Destiny because I don't think it would do anything. He's gonna troll anyway, as he always does.
I'm
But
not
we're
even
gonna,
trolling right now.
huh?
There's a serious conversation. Why would I troll during this conversation?
My nigga, you literally troll during every single conversation. Like
Okay.
you
We'll
just,
see.
I think you literally have a goal of like, how can I piss somebody off and make them get unhinged and then like disrupt the panel, like literally every time. That's your
It's not
game.
like something I would do, but okay.
It sounds
All right.
exactly like what
That's
you're
cool.
doing.
Character study, all right.
I
Anyway,
have to say, I feel left out. I haven't had the special one-on-one Fanatic.
you didn't, not so erudite. You're
Ooh.
absolutely
You know what?
right.
TTR. We haven't
It's
defined the
probab-
relationship yet.
It's
Well-
probably because you don't troll a whole lot, right?
You don't
Well,
troll, and like the first
Time to get
time,
started.
I thought like so I learned the lesson that you have to tell every single person like after like a few mishaps. But prior to that, I didn't know that I needed to do that. So like I wasn't doing it with every single person. And you've already been on the panel and have like displayed that you know how to do it, like how to have an actual conversation.
Fanatic was very, very firm with me. He said, "You can't troll in
That's
this
it.
panel."
Unlike Destiny, I'm very mature.
Yeah, well, you know what's
very
crazy is I
adult.
didn't like for Stardust. I didn't tell her not to do like blood sports or anything. Hers was like, yeah, please just don't troll. It's like I don't think she ever does like screaming and yelling and acting crazy. But she
I do some screaming and yelling, but
Really?
yeah, you've never. Okay, well that's fine.
It's good. No, I've never encountered that, but I mean, you know, it's good that you're capable. Because you know, there's a place for that for everywhere. But anyway, listen, we're gonna go ahead and start. This is the Fanatiq show, the Fanatiq panel. We're gonna be discussing rape culture, sexual assault, and I guess kind of the media and its influence there as well. I'm thankful that you guys were all here. Originally, this conversation was inspired by a person named Katie. She wasn't able to make it. I guess she kind of felt mentally drained after our hour conversation, and she said she didn't want to debate something like this. So, I mean, I can't do anything about that. But I did find a panel, I think, of very able and capable people to discuss this. So we're going to jump right into it. As usual, the purpose of this is to have a conversation. Not everyone will disagree, but it's okay. We can still like explore the nuance around this topic and have an interesting conversation. Thank you guys for all being a part of that and understanding that goal. So the existence of rape culture is contested. Coined in the 1970s, the stated goal was to bring awareness to the fact that rape was significantly more pervasive than public knowledge of its occurrence. Whereas rape culture is defined as a setting in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Is this real? Is it something that we should be concerned about? So I guess we're going to go ahead and let everyone give their opening statements on that. Great, Kai, just starting with Taftaj.
Oh boy. Yeah, so Taftaj or April, if that's easier. I don't think we have a rape culture. I think we have a casual sex culture and a hookup culture and a culture which encourages ways of engaging with sex which are dangerous and frivolous. And I think that like the natural result of stripping a lot of meaning from sex and a lot of the seriousness that comes with it, when you boil sex down to purely just like, you know, seeking this consent, I think you create an incentive for incredibly transactional, temporary relationships. And with those kinds of relationships, you also get bad sex and you get a lot of boundaries which are easily crossed. And so I think that like what you really should be concerned about, if you're concerned about like the modern prevalence of, you know, boundary crossing, is addressing that casual hookup culture and teaching people that they need to engage with it a lot more responsibly or avoid that kind of culture at all. And so, yeah, we'll get into the details of that, but that's my general position.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Great take. Not so erudite. Would you like to follow up?
Sure. So yeah, I guess my position is that I think like when it comes to like sex and sexual harassment and sexual assaults, there's definitely a problem within our culture. To label that rape culture feels inaccurate and somewhat inflammatory, particularly when you have like internationally cultures that like actually legitimately do more so normalize and have a much higher prevalence rate of like full on rape. Um, I do think that there is a problem with boundary crossing. I do think that there are issues, right? Like, it would be nice to see sexual assault rates decrease over time. And I'm really for educating that. But I think when we get into like these inflammatory words like rape culture and stuff, we actually like steal away from the nuance necessary to like properly educate women and men and individuals about how to have like safe sex and how to assert boundaries in dating and whatnot.
Okay. Stardust.
Yeah. So I do think it used to be the case in that circumstances and the behavior of a victim was heavily scrutinized before anyone took a sexual misconduct case at face value. With things like the Me Too movement and other movements, it seems like the attitude around that has changed to automatically believe all people when they come out with an allegation. And I don't think that that's healthy either. I think that with that being the case, we've kind of like flipped innocent until proven guilty on its head for in like a public sphere. We've flipped it on its head pretty badly, and I think that actually feeds back into like into this kind of this really toxic kind of like feedback loop where it's like scrutinize everything but and don't believe anybody, and then no, you have to believe everybody, and how dare you scrutinize things. So that's kind of how it seems like there's like this very bad kind of cycle going. So yeah.
Okay. And Kai Clips, can you answer the question? Does rape culture exist? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of difficult because a few other panelists have talked about kind of the colloquial rape culture in that it's like non-consenting individuals. I think it's a little more complex than that. I think kind of Stardust was, well, maybe not so much, but I think I'll allude to the fact that certain elements of society can build into rape culture in the sense that it desensitizes people to, forms of violence within relationships. The kind I've interacted with a lot is just the kind of the opposite of rape culture, which is that oftentimes there's like a sexual relationship between a man and a woman, and then a few months down the line, and that relationship being totally consensual, a few months down the line, the woman will change her mind as to what she understood the relationship to be. And then in 99% of cases, the guy is the one who receives all of the blame. And I think there's an inappropriate infantilization of women when it comes to that, thinking that women can, are always the ones who are innocent and are never the ones who encourage a sexual interaction. And I think that gets us into some hot water pretty quick societally.
Okay. And Destiny.
When I think of rape culture, I think of like two kind of different things that kind of get smushed together into the same thing. The first concept of rape culture, which I think is a little bit older, is this idea that I think Stardust mentioned this, that women kind of aren't really believable, that a lot of rape is made up, and people are kind of uncomfortable even talking about there being like rape. So that was a conversation that we weren't having publicly. And then I think the Me Too movement kind of blew that up. So I think largely we've gotten over that generally, with some exception, that like women have a better time today coming out and being taken seriously, especially online, than they used to in the past. Whether that's gotten too far or not is another conversation. And then there's kind of like this second understanding of rape culture, which I think more broadly applies to kind of the dating habits that we have in society, where women are seen as the gatekeepers of sex and men are seen as like the chasers of sex. And then in that society, men kind of have a bunch of tools at their disposal that they utilize in order to get sex from the women. And when talking about that type of rape culture, I don't really know if that's really been addressed at all yet. Because we don't really have conversations around like consent or sex. We just kind of have like really juvenile screaming like "don't rape at people." Yeah.
Okay. And last, Anna.
Well, it seems like I'm the only one that is actually engaged with the research on this topic, because the research suggests that absolutely rape culture is still alive and well in the US. There's plenty of literature reviews that prove this. So I don't know what else to say on that, except that basically rape culture is about it's about the sociocultural attitudes about victims and rape that are pervasive in a society. And the fact that rapes are still extremely underreported from both men and women. And also the fact that rape myth acceptance, which is an academic term, there's plenty of research on this. Again, rape myth acceptance is still highly prevalent. So this means that people, despite the Me Too movement and everything, maybe that helped a little, but despite that, people still believe things that are false about rape and victims. And that is what rape culture is. And there's really no denying that it exists.
Okay, the floor is open. Yeah, you guys can go ahead and have at it.
I think the problem is that like the question or the debate is really about like what is the appropriate term for this. I think we can agree that there are misconceptions about how rape occurs and the level at which sexual assault occurs. But whether or not we actually label that rape culture is what's contentious. I think we also have, disagreements about or misunderstandings regarding murder rates and what constitutes murder and other forms of physical violence. But I think it's too much to say that we live in like a murder culture. That term is really, I think, where the debate is centered around. And I think the problem with the term is that it fails to really identify where the problems are. And it just sort of like loosely blames men or paints men as like the progenitors of this, and what we really need to do is like control men's behavior. And I think that the problem's a lot deeper than that and goes really into how we engage with sex as a culture in general. And so I think when we reframe the conversation to be about like hookup culture or casual sex, I think we're getting towards like why those rapes and that sexual assault is actually coming. But
Yeah, I don't disagree that there is some form of like rape culture, as people call it. I just think that it's significantly changed from what it used to be, right? It used to be that every single piece of information surrounding a case coming out would be heavily scrutinized. Everything right down to like what somebody was wearing was scrutinized. And while that wasn't healthy in itself, I also don't think it's healthy that we now kind of exist in a space where when somebody comes out with an allegation, we have we've decide to deem somebody 100% guilty on a public stage before they're given a chance to even defend themselves, or for the actual case itself to be like moved forward in the legal system, things like that. And also there's also the very real problem of just miscommunication with relationships. The fact that men are kind of taught to be pursuers, right? And they're taught that some men are taught that women are playing hard to get, right? And some women are taught to play hard to get. So this does create a lot of deeper issues that complicate this rape culture even more. And I think it really does feed into itself. It makes things harder for everybody on all sides.
I think something that's really important that kind of gets brought up is initially when the Me Too thing started, it was about holding people accountable that were able to escape accountability. I promise I'm not trying to trigger you with this one, Fanatiq, but I think that there were some people that for whatever reason managed to evade the legal system, but when an accusation would come out, you would find out that like sometimes dozens of women would have a similar story dealing with a guy. And it would seem like, okay, it seems like this person was, for whatever reason, able to escape accountability in the justice system. So when they couldn't find justice in the legal routes, they kind of went like, I don't want to say the social media route, but like the public square route, basically. And we went from this idea that like maybe some especially powerful men could escape accountability, but with enough women coming forward, you kind of have some accountability. We went from that to if a single woman accuses a single guy of anything, it's automatically 100% true. And I think the problem is when you set the bar that low, now we've seen, even in just our space, that's not a good threshold for it's not a good threshold for those types of accusations. And what's worse is it kind of reinforces those prior beliefs that, well, hold on, maybe we do need to be really skeptical of some women making these accusations, because then you find out that some come out, you read through everything, and you're like, okay, well, this was kind of bullshit, or this was kind of shoddy, and then it reinforces those views that maybe we should be more skeptical about the claims being made when it's just coming from a single person.
I mean, I think we should also appreciate like how exceptional the situation and the circumstances are that women are even doing this in the first place. If you look at like other cultures, like in China, where women are still receiving like major pushback from trying to, discuss their experiences with party officials, or look back into history and like the relative inability for women to speak up in most cultures. The ability of women today to really hold powerful men accountable is really incredibly unique. And I think it speaks to like, how far the culture has changed when it comes to taking rape and sexual assault seriously. So to cast it as like this rape culture, again, I think it like, it sort of obscures that cultural change that has occurred.
So where are your studies? So where are your studies that show that any of this is true? Both of you. Where are the studies on this? Show me the studies.
Wait, they show that what's true?
What you just
I do
said.
have to say
that women are able to hold powerful men accountable now more than in other times in history.
Where's your proof that this has changed?
Twitter has not existed for most of human history. The internet has not existed for most of human history. If you want to like bring something to the public square, and you're a woman who doesn't have like a lot of economic leeway, you can't vote, your ability to bring information to the public square is severely limited.
And those women still get harassed and death threats and all kinds of things, do they not?
Yeah,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
In the past and now.
I would say that again. I think Destiny's on to something with holding powerful men accountable. But what we also see is that this has become about not holding powerful men accountable. It's also become about accusing the average man. And one accusation against an average man, or even like a man who is not powerful, who's disadvantaged in certain ways, can be very, very harmful for that person. So yes, it initially was about holding these powerful people accountable, but now we had to acknowledge at some point that we do see that there are some men who are not powerful, who are being accused and being made into a guilty person in a public sphere before even having their voice heard.
I think it's I think it's also really important that like we have a realistic expectation for what we can suspect or expect out of society. Like anybody making any accusation against anybody ever is going to receive some level of public pushback, especially if it's against a celebrity. But that's probably not even
justified. So don't try and justify it.
It's not a justification. It's about an expectation of like reality. Like if a sports person like loses to another sports person, soccer, basketball, whatever, like those people are going to get hate. If somebody makes an accusation of murder or assault or rape against somebody, they're going to get a level of like hate. If our goal is to say like we need to have a society where somebody can make some accusation and never get hate for it, that's like unrealistic. That expectation.
Or we need to have a society.
We don't want that society.
Or we need to have a society where maybe trauma survivors, there's an understanding of trauma and there's more education of trauma survivors and what victim blaming does to a trauma survivor.
I think you can rope that into like the parts that Destiny and Stardust and myself are trying to bring up though. And you kind of overshadow the reality that might not be as attractive. Like, sure, we probably agree on this panel that we should provide more support to people who suffer from trauma. But if you get like 70 people or even just like a dozen people after somebody's been accused of like assaulting somebody or sexually harassing somebody, if 70 people step in afterwards, it is realistic to assume that the fact that accusations have been brought up is now playing a part in the way that people perceive the prior relationship they had with that individual. And it becomes one of these things like, oh, wow, I interacted with so-and-so before and they did something that at the time, like I totally didn't see as a problem. And maybe I even flirted back. But now that I've got the lens of them being an abuser, I'm going to shape my opinion of them that way. So I think for you to say we should just, provide more support for abusers, I think that's like, it's not a disagreeable point, and it doesn't address what we've been raising as a problem with the way, the response
because you've shown no proof now. Because you've shown no proof to back up any of your bullshit. That's why.
Wait, hold on.
Destiny said something really. Destiny said something really.
One second. Yeah, let's try to be chill. Oh. Is my mic not muted? It isn't. Let's try to be chill, Anna. But yeah, like so you're asking them for proof of what exactly?
That any of the bullshit that they said is real.
Okay, but Destiny said, like, yeah, back in the day, it was about holding people accountable. I don't know if you want like a study of like the origins of Me Too, but I think we all saw, like,
how is it different? How is it different now?
how is it different now?
People
Because
are
it's
comfortable coming
a
Because you
forward now,
social
think
right?
it is.
phenomenon.
No, because you
because
think
it's a
it
social
is.
phenomenon. I
Again,
mean,
back
somebody
it
at
up.
your
Wait,
school.
hold on.
Back up with proof.
Here, wait. So
There's
the
a lot of
backup would be:
empowering
has there
images.
ever been a culture that existed where people feel comfortable going on a big social media platform and sharing their like rape, abuse, or sexual harassment stories? I'm not aware of that ever existed in my lifetime. Say for maybe like 5 or 6 years ago when it started to get really popular with twitlongers on Twitter. Has that type of culture ever existed?
There's always been accusations that have existed.
We're not talking about accusations. We're talking about somebody coming out, sharing an accusation
Why are you framing it like it's a problem?
I'm not framing it like it's a problem. I'm just saying that it's something that happens now that didn't used to happen. There's people coming out and socially sharing accusations against sometimes very public figures on social media platforms. That's a new behavior that has never
And this
existed
is a
before.
great thing.
I haven't said it's not.
well-
And you agree that it's a great thing, so then we agree. That's our source, is what's
Good.
happening.
I think we've agreed that, or at least I've
Wait,
said
hold on.
that.
Hold on.
I've said that
So, wait.
rape culture is. I've said that rape culture is real. It is a thing, but we have to acknowledge the ways that things have changed now. The Me Too movement was good for holding like powerful people accountable, and we can't deny that. Like it had a worldwide effect. Like the Me Too movement actually took off huge in India, and I'm sure it took off huge in other countries too, where patriarchal society is even more heavily enforced, right? Where rape is even more common. So yeah, there's I'm not saying that there's anything bad about this movement happening. It's the results of it. We have to acknowledge that there is the result in which men who are not powerful and men who are also very disadvantaged are going to inevitably face repercussions of the attitude change we've had towards sexual assault and the way that we view it in the public sphere, right?
Erudite, please.
I was just going to say, I think we also really need to be careful when we're talking about like academic studies around this stuff, because like a lot of the studies around like rape and stuff like that, it's really, really difficult to actually do really strong empirical.
No, it's really not
Wait,
erudite.
Yes.
wait.
No,
wait.
it's really
hold on.
not.
Hold on.
It's hard to do
Anna, wait, hold
sociological
on.
studies on
Hold on.
most things.
Hold on.
Because
Hold on.
she's
Hold on.
wrong.
Hold on.
So I'm just
Hold
supposed
on.
to let her be wrong.
Anna.
We're both
Anna.
in a master's
Anna.
program.
Anna.
And I know this as well as you do.
Jesus, listen, Anna.
Okay.
Hold on. Wait. Look. The purpose of this is to have a conversation, and even if you're getting frustrated or triggered, you can easily just let someone finish their sentence before you interject. Like that's just how a civil conversation goes with adults. So I'm asking you to
fine.
please be an adult in this scenario. Let her finish her statement and then address it.
All right.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Okay.
Erudite.
So a lot of these studies rely on retrospective and epidemiological reports. So there's issues where immediately you can't make causational statements. And a lot of this is retrospective reports are really difficult because the way that you phrase questions really matters, right? And so you have to be really careful in how, like self-reports are rough. So for example, I'm sure like probably Annie, you're more aware of like the 1999 like rape myth acceptance scale. When I look through that, I think it's a decently solid scale, but the psychometric properties haven't been tested super closely, right? And so like the idea that like we just need studies to prove all these things, it's like a lot of times society is changing at a rate, particularly with technology, that research can't keep up with super well. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the studies or that we shouldn't strive to have more empiricism about these topics. I'm super for that. But to just be like, well, I need studies to prove like Destiny's claim, I'm like, it probably doesn't exist, but the lack of evidence doesn't actually prove that the phenomenon isn't necessarily going on. We have to talk about like things that we can observe anecdotally and then what we can support on what we see empirically and kind of do our best to tease between these two things.
The other thing is that
Wait.
like we're talking about these scenarios which are relatively infrequent and have to do with like relatively few people. So when you look at like the big Me Too cases, you know, we're talking about like populations of maybe like 24 people, right? Like it's really hard to do or come to any meaningful like scientific conclusion based on so little data.
Anna,
That's
you can
why.
respond.
Right. Well, I don't know why you're even bringing that up as it's a non-issue, since, I mean, I wouldn't bring up studies that only use a small population. And also, that's not entirely true, Erudite, and you should know better, because the rape myth acceptance scale is still empirically validated. And if something is empirically validated, we can still certainly use it.
Yeah, you could use it, right? But you get to like assign levels of weight that we assign to things. So, for example, right, a new anxiety scale that has just been created might be psychometrically validated within itself, but until it's been tested robustly cross-culturally and a whole bunch of other
Yes.
psychometric properties to make it valid, we only assign a certain level of weight. We also only assign a certain level of weight to self-reports in general compared to other things that can be more observable, like behavioral phenomenon. Now, in the case of sexual assault, where a ton of sexual assault goes unreported, that's exceedingly difficult research to do, right? Which is why we get left with a lot of incredibly inductive studies that I'm not dismissing. And I'm not saying that there aren't problems with sexual assault. There aren't problems with women being harassed. I'm saying that when we're like trying to be like, just give me the science, it's like, it's actually difficult. The science isn't there. And there's a problem with that.
The only way to accurately test trauma and the experience of sexual violence is through asking people. And that's the only way to really test that. So, unless
Wait.
we can figure out how to mind read people.
But at what point does that like cover for the data? Like you can't just say, well, it's really difficult to pull people differently or to actually measure it and to change our methodology or vary it. But just saying that doesn't make your claim or your reliance on the data more significant. Just because all the data that exists needs to or is being done in a way that's not perfect doesn't make that data any more reliable. Just means that there's not many good ways of doing it.
I don't see how it's not reliable. What do you mean?
Well, I'm saying like you can't write off I forget who it was, maybe it was Not So Erudite, but you can't write off the description of maybe there's some problems in self-reporting data. You can't just write that off as like adding to the validity of the studies.
No, but you also can't just write off the data, can you?
Well, but
I think we all agree that like when it comes to things like rape, and even when it comes to like crime stats, self-reporting is sometimes the only way we can collect data. This is why when you're looking up like crime data, sometimes you're digging through self-victimization reports, right? You're getting reports on crime that's happened in a specific area because, as we know, not all crime gets reported. Same thing with rape stuff. So I don't think anybody is saying that self-reporting is bad. I don't think even Erudite, I don't think you would say that, right? But we have to acknowledge the limits of that data, and we have to be a little bit realistic when we try to say like, this is proven. And it's like the strength of the claim that you can make with such retrospective data is going to be pretty limited, more so than I think the comfort level of somebody saying like, we've proven this with it. Like you wouldn't make a super solid claim about it. We can only point to it and kind of like infer from there, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
The only reason to bring it up is to dismiss the data.
That's kind of like what I was getting at.
Kai, then Anna.
It's to say like,
Yes,
what
it
level-
Wait, wait, hold on. Kai, then Anna.
So yeah, that was kind of the point I was getting at. We don't have to say the data's awful. We'll try to get the best data we can, but admitting that the data is not flawless doesn't mean that, or that all the data is not flawless, doesn't mean you can just jump into it as like, well, now we just rely on all of it. We need to go into examining however much data there is, understanding that there are limitations, but it doesn't
and that's
look like
my
you're
job, not
understanding.
yours.
Well, yeah, but you're coming at this like, well, because all the data has this, kind of flaw, and because, the self-reporting data is not great.
Not flawed.
That's the only data we have, so let's just rely on it. And Destiny and Not So Erudite are all just saying, maybe we should walk into this understanding the limitations and not relying on it as if there are none.
No, they're saying that we should be believing their anecdotal experiences of Twitter, people on Twitter more so. And I'm saying no.
Is that what you're saying, Destiny and Not So Erudite?
Well,
that's not
actually,
what Destiny was saying.
Even framed uncharitably, yeah, I would say that. Like, for instance, I think that there are some social claims that we can make that I'm not going to be able to give you a study for. So, for instance, men tend to be favored for actors well into their later years, and women tend to get pushed out very early. But I can't give you a study showing that. I can just point to every single Hollywood movie that has like a 65-year-old man paired with a 22-year-old woman. Or I could show you how statements, qualitative data, I guess, from actresses that'll say, yeah, I got this job. I think it was because I was 20 years old. Or, actresses getting cast when they're 17 for some films, cast as adults just because people that. But I can't give you like a study to prove that. We can all kind of just look at the social phenomenon and go, yeah, this is definitely a thing that happens.
That's not true, because I vehemently disagree with your anecdotal evidence of what happens on Twitter. So
Wait, but
no,
how, okay, hold on, wait,
basis
hold
for your
on, I want to be
disagreement?
clear. Hold on.
the basis is that women are still treated horrifically.
That's not the claim. The claim that I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Here is the claim that I think that everybody or at least
Victims are not believed.
Okay, chill. The claim is that in the past there were no social platforms for women to come together and make accusations against men that can't be held accountable in other ways. Now that platform exists. By definition, women receive more support for those reports now because they didn't even exist in the past than they would have in the past. I'm not saying there's no harassment.
They're getting terrorized more.
That's a separate claim, and it's not relevant to what I'm saying.
Well, that's also like a bad argument. It's like, yeah,
No, it's
now
not.
that you're
happens.
just let me finish and I'll explain it. You're saying they get terrorized more. Yeah, they've taken, this issue of somebody, getting canceled, somebody going Me Too, and you're taking it to potentially hundreds of thousands of people. Of course, you're going to have more backlash. The backlash as a
Okay,
proportion.
so you're justifying them being terrorized. I don't care about your opinion then.
That's not what I was.
Jesus.
That's literally what
Oh,
you
my
just
Lord.
I don't think
said.
anybody's
Anna.
justifying it.
This
I
is
think
crazy.
we can agree that I think we can agree
It's
that
not okay that for anyone
Hold
to
on,
get terrorized.
Anna. You can't just
I
interrupt.
agree
Wait, hold
on
on.
that.
Wait. Can I pause for just a second? Anna, you can't just interrupt every time like you want to say something. Everyone else is taking their time and acting like adults. I'm asking you to do the same thing here. Not everyone's just talking over everyone. You have a point to be made. There's not that many people here. It's a civil conversation.
I'm the only
Everyone,
one who is again.
Okay.
Like you dogpiled me basically with all these fucking people who don't believe in the data.
Okay, so does the
I
dog?
think-
I-
I think
wait,
we're-
What data are we
Does the
appealing to?
dog
Okay,
pile?
sorry.
Does the dog pile? Is this a circumstance that you're uncomfortable with, such that we should do a
I mean,
different
why
panel or
didn't you
something?
tell me that I was going to be on a panel with people who everyone apparently disagrees with rape culture? You just set
I
me up.
don't disagree.
I apologize
don't
if you feel
disagree.
set up. Is this a conversation that you should be removed from? Do you think that this is a conversation that the environment that it's too hostile for you?
No, I'll be fine.
Okay, so listen. I get that you're saying you're going to be fine, but your response is saying that basically because you feel dogpiled that you're going to do this. So if you're not going to be able to be civil, if you're not going to be fine, then we should just remove you from the circumstance because I don't want you feeling dogpiled. That was not my intention here. But if this is something that you can't do, then obviously we need to do that. Like I need you to actually read the room and be respectful moving forward, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Go ahead, Stardust.
Could we maybe start with like
Uh,
concessions, like things that we can agree with, and then like maybe build up so that like I don't know, there's some movement
Let's
in the
lower the
conversation?
temperature.
Yeah,
Sure.
I
Let's
think-
Stardust go and then we'll do that.
I think that Anna, I think you're not looking at this in a very nuanced way. I don't think we disagree that much. I think that so I've said that yes, rape culture is a thing, but the circumstances around how we deal with allegations of assault in a public stage have changed, that our attitude towards it has changed, and that feeds back into the toxicity of what rape culture is. It feeds back into, well, if there are people who are making these claims and our automatic response is to automatically make people guilty, maybe we should be really scrutinizing this more. And so it feeds back into us heavily scrutinizing all of the circumstances around somebody coming forward with an assault case, right? And we've still got plenty of men who are afraid to come forward. We've still, so these are all real things. It's just we have to acknowledge that there are men who are not powerful. There are marginalized men who are very significantly affected by these allegations that come out.
I'm not sure it's just men. I mean,
Well,
women
sure.
get falsely accused also.
Sure.
What's the data on women versus men getting falsely accused?
The data on false accusations is that they're extremely rare. David
like-
Lisak's research,
but
Dr.
like
David
men-
Lisak.
How
But,
much
like,
weight
men
do you
or
think we
women?
can stock in that data? Because to get that data, you have to have people either admit or be proven that they've made a false allegation, which is going to be difficult data to get, right? Malingering data is
Yes.
notoriously awful to try to acquire.
I just want to know, like, as a proportion of the data that exists, flawed as it may be, what's like the proportion of men to women who get falsely accused?
I haven't actually looked at that, so I can't say.
Okay, so I have a good question. The statistics from RAIN.org claim that 26.4% of females and 6.8% of males experience rape or sexual assault. Do you guys believe that that statistic is accurate?
I think prevalence rates are so difficult in this area. I definitely think it's high, and I think it's higher than it. I mean, obviously, anything below above 0% is higher than it should be, right? But I think there's actually serious cause for concern, particularly with intimate partner violence, especially because we saw an escalation of it during COVID. But prevalence rates of anything that's based mostly on even like child abuse is really difficult because there could be two things where both like people forget memories, or they feel like abuse didn't happen when we might document it, and other individuals who might hear like a question like about consent and kind of misunderstand it and be like, oh yeah, I've had drunk sex before, and they'll equate that to non-consent. So retrospective data is really difficult to tease through. So like getting an accurate prevalence rate is a nightmare. And if you look up like literally, and like the one like CDC has certain numbers that like I looked through the methodology, it's not terrible methodology, but then the Justice Bureau has different numbers. And then if you look up just like independent epidemiological studies, you get again different numbers. And
Can
so
I-
like
Two questions. So firstly, I linked a paper in chat, a 2020 paper that shows that the increase in reporting of sex-related crimes does seem to have increased after the Me Too stuff, which would show a positive knock-on effect culturally of that happening. And then secondly, just because I'm not a stats loser, not so right. You kept mentioning that like it's hard because these are retrospective. Can you do prospective like rape studies, or what does that mean? When you like, what would be a different way of? I'm curious. Sorry.
Yeah, so that would be prospective. All you could do with those would be allegations of rape that have been brought to trial and then found guilty. Those would be broadly, or you can look at
And we know how
cases that have at least just been brought to the police. Those would be the best you could do with prospective studies. So prospective is also not great because you have the dark
No,
side of
not at all.
prospective studies because lots of people don't report crime. All
those
crime.
are highly flawed, and you know that they are highly flawed because of
Yeah,
so
I'm saying
many
that
The
there's
issues.
problem is
them.
all of
Yeah.
them are flawed. All of
Yeah.
these are flawed.
Not
That's
the
issue.
retrospective
Yes, of course
studies
they are. Or even what
are
we
far
consider
less
sexual
flawed.
assault can be like really flawed. There's a lot of criticisms with that. One study, there's a number that gets cited all the time that 1 out of 6 women have been sexually harassed, and I think that came from literally data from 2 universities. For where that number was pulled from, and it gets cited everywhere, like it's ubiquitous across all of society. So I mean, like all of these things
The
have
rate
their
is
issues.
higher than that.
Maybe.
But
I
we,
don't know.
like
Hard to
Anna,
tell.
course it is.
you and
Yes,
I
it
both just
is.
agreed that there's retrospective issues for sure. And there's, this is what I'm saying. Research on this is really difficult because there's issues in either direction we do the study. Probably what we should do is some like numbers between the retrospective and prospective, but where do we draw even that point between the two? Because we know with prospective, we're vastly going to be underrepresenting the problem. And with retrospective, we might be vastly overreporting it. So like and to what extent are we doing this on both sides? And we don't have the answer. So we can't put our finger well on prevalence.
So where
other
are
than
these
saying there's a problem.
researchers? So where are these researchers highlighting the issue with retrospective retrospective rape surveys? Because I don't see
I
that
can get-
many.
Okay.
I
so
can get you a couple. Like there's a lot there. This is like pretty standardly known within epidemiological studies that retrospective
Same thing with
studies of
crime stats,
anything,
too, yeah.
because memory's fucking flawed. Like it's just an issue with any retrospective, particularly self-report data. I can get you studies, but it's broadly a pretty well-known
But the
control flaw
issue,
in epidemiology.
but the issue is that if a trauma victim feels that they've been, I mean, then that trauma ends up being real. I mean,
But that's not.
we
that
know
doesn't mean
this.
that a rape happened.
But that
though.
didn't
That's
mean
the
that a rape
issue.
happened, and there was
Well,
We're
one
not
and
asking if
that's-
there's trauma. We're asking if there was a sexual assault,
And
that
that's
doesn't
the
necessarily
issue
follow.
that I brought up at the beginning, right? It's like, especially retrospectively, if you hear that somebody is like is a sexual abuser or something like that, then that is the frame that you're going to be looking at all of your interactions with that person with. And I mean, I don't know if you have
I
data
don't think
refuting
that's
that. but-
necessarily the case. No, I don't think that's how like people are that simplistic. I don't.
They
think that's
absolutely
the
are
case.
simplistic.
Yeah.
There's
No,
so
they
much
really
research in the
aren't.
psychology world that shows how susceptible people are. There are like so many classic psychology experiments that show that with some little amount of public pressure, you can get people to say some stuff that they
Yes,
know
but
is
that
wrong.
doesn't mean that someone is going to be tricked into thinking that they've been raped or
It's not a
something.
trick.
Okay, wait, hold on,
Well,
hold on,
it's
hold
also
on.
about
It's
public
that-
perception.
I
I
would,
mean,
I would really.
false memory creation is a well-documented phenomenon.
I get
Yes,
that.
by
It's a
Hold on.
serious
therapists.
But I
problem.
want to.
By
I would really like to get
Yes,
past.
I know.
I would really like to get past like the stats argument, and let's like talk more about like how like the idea of rape culture in general. Maybe if we don't have stats to back it up, do we feel
We
like
do.
Okay,
We
sure.
do have stats to
Well,
back it up.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that um, do we think that sexual assault and the prevalence of sexual assault can be influenced by different things? For example, the women's lib movement, or pornography, or the media. How do we think that interacts with rape culture? Can we get to that part?
I think inherently media and anything that's socioculture is inherently going to infect social behavior, right? It's going to change our understandings of consent. It's going to understand or change our conception of this like gatekeeping male pursuer dynamic that's like kind of weird and like creates like a lot of like bad positions as well for people. And so I would say all of these things contribute. To what extent, sure, we can argue about that, but like absolutely these things contribute. And it's probably important for us to figure out which things contribute the most to particularly problematic or like consent pushing behaviors from either partner in sexual engagements and romantic relationships.
I think there's also, you need to make a distinction, because a lot of times when we talk about solutions to sexual assault or rape, there's a lot that women can do to like protect themselves and put themselves in positions where they're less vulnerable. And just because we like acknowledge that women have this like ability doesn't necessarily mean that they have like the moral responsibility. And I think that like, there's this like classic scenario that people always like propose, where like this woman's at a party and like she's getting drunk, and she's really putting herself in a very vulnerable, dangerous position. And she ends up being, taken advantage of. She ends up being assaulted. The person who's assaulting her is still the one who's like engaging in this moral wrong. They're doing something evil, but we also can acknowledge that like a woman has the ability to like improve her situation and avoid those sorts of scenarios without necessarily placing the moral blame on her. And when we like get into these discussions, I just think it's like good to keep that in mind, that just, if we acknowledge that like women have some power to, manage their danger, that doesn't necessarily mean that women are responsible morally for the danger that, or for sexual assault that might happen to them.
There. No one else has anything? Kai?
Yeah, so I mean, I've read through some of the research about pornography and like what was the metric you guys brought up earlier about, was
The
it?
rape myths acceptance scale.
Yes. I forget if the research that I was reading mentioned that scale or if it was something else. They had like a
Probably
list of
that one.
questions.
That one's the most pervasive one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, from what I've seen, there's not a huge there's not a very easy way to prove, and then there's also not a huge link to pornography increasing the rates of sexual assault, which is something that I originally thought would happen. But from what I have read, it changes people's perception of sex relationships and of violent behavior within relationships in such a way that if so much of this conversation is focused around what people determine to be assault and like the lens they have, I think that certainly has a major effect on what people consider their own trauma or abuse. If they've had this behavior normalized and if they've become desensitized to this kind of behavior, then, and we do know that porn has a desensitizing effect, maybe not in the mind. I'm sure Anna would disagree there, but at least to the material, then that would most likely have an effect on what people consider to be assault. And I think that letting that permeate, letting sex work or pornography, any of these things that are, in my opinion, by definition, dangerous jobs that engage frequently with these depictions of sex involving violence or other things, we're only kind of inviting in problems with rape or the perception of it.
Taftaj, that touches very heavily on what you do for a living. Do you feel like you have a lot to say to that?
I mean, sort of. I'm in like a unique position in that like, my day job was just like posting sexy pictures online, but I don't depict like sex or, that sort of, I don't depict any sex between people really, or a lot of like self-sex. So it overlaps. I know that like people have brought up the prevalence of like choking in pornography, and how when people, engage with pornography that depicts, these violent or, these BDSM sex acts, and you go into sex and you're very new to it and you don't have a lot of experience, people report like, oh, this guy like tried to choke me because that's, what he thought was appropriate. And he thought that's how sex works. So I think, a lot of people do get like instruction for how sex operates from pornography. And the reality is that like a lot of pornography, the way that it depicts sex is a very like mythologized way. That's just, it's not accurate to the way sex actually happens in the real world. And really sets people up for failure when they engage with it, thinking it's going to be one way, and it's not that way.
Okay, Stardust. How about you? Do you feel like the things that they're talking about, as far as like sex work, pornography, and all of those things, do you think that has any impact on rape culture? And if not on rape culture, do you think that has any negative impacts on just, I guess, kind of society at large, or any of that?
I would need more time to, I think, ponder on that question. But I did want to go back to a point that Kai made that I thought was pretty good, was that generally when somebody's accused in a public manner, everybody who's interacted with that person starts to second guess their interactions with that person. So you think about like a pretty normal interaction you've had with that person, and you start to think, well, was that creepy? Or what was this, like, was that a normal interaction? And so even like the best people can fall prey to that type of thinking, right? The most consistent people can fall prey to that type of thinking. And I think that's a pretty important thing to consider, especially when we're talking about, again, like marginalized people who get accused in a public manner. So.
Yeah, I think there's also
I don't think that's relevant at all. Why would it be relevant?
Well, if we're talking about, like, again, how we have flipped the innocent until proven guilty kind of thing on its head in certain
I don't think
scenarios.
we have at all.
In certain
So the
scenarios.
flip is that, like, socially, somebody can be basically seen as guilty before like anything's ever gone to court or any formal charges are made. We've seen that.
Everywhere to
definitely
hold
play
a
out.
Well,
hashtag believe all women, right?
I mean,
And it's based on that premise that
I mean,
like
there's
you should
entire-
just believe to
Yeah.
start.
Wait,
Well, and what's like there's
we can't all
horrible.
we can't all like talk like Destiny made his point, then Stardust, and into April. Anna, you can respond, and then you can go ahead, Kai.
Oh, I mean, that's because the criminal justice system is notoriously awful when it comes to
You're
prosecuting
saying,
rape.
so I said, yeah, but we're saying
Horrible.
something happens, then you're saying it doesn't happen, then we say, yeah, it does happen. You go, oh, well, this is why it happens. So we can,
No,
we
I'm
can
saying it
agree
doesn't
why-
happen.
Well, if so you're saying that it isn't the case that socially, when somebody is dropped an accusation, people tend to immediately side with the accuser, and then the accused can get in
Not
trouble
when it's a
with-
woman. No, people don't
Well,
believe women.
We
Okay,
don't have
this
to
is
even
the
go
just-
other
that far.
person-
This
what
is
We can
just-
just say
what if the
there's
other-
some group in society that
Well, no,
automatically.
we don't have to
believes-
say some group. We don't have to appeal hyper. This has happened like time and
No,
time
I
again,
am
like in the
saying there
esports
is some
world and
group.
Twitch world.
There are
Like we see
other
this, right?
parties that
I've
get
seen it
accused
happen, but
that
people
are
don't believe women.
Wait,
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. What I'm talking about, this is why I specifically said the part about the accused person being a marginalized person themselves. If we're talking about a man of color, right? There are.
I don't think they even have to be a marginalized person. I think just any guy can fall victim.
Yeah,
to
it could be an average guy. Yeah, it could be. But like these are very these are like very real things that we've observed in popular culture in just like the public sphere. So I think that it's worth acknowledging, right?
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's a robust phenomenon. I mean, we've seen multiple cases of trial. There's entire TikToks dedicated to basically trial by media, where they get a certain couple of claims. It's basically believe victim, and then they go after the individual without any measure of trial, or like they don't even vet to ensure that the things are true. And so, like the idea, like isn't happening, that there isn't kind of this like just believe victims. Like the issue is that like when the Me Too movement started, like just believe victims was a good mantra because there was like institutional issues with rape victims coming forward and being
still
dismissed
are.
out of hand. There really isn't. Like there
Yes,
are
there
off cases.
is. The
not
data
really.
shows this. The
Which
data
data?
shows this. I'll show you plenty of it. I can't believe you're actually denying this. This is so dishonest.
It's
What are
Just
we
link
not
it. I mean,
in?
you can just link stuff in the Discord and we
yeah,
can read it.
just
I guess.
send me
Yeah,
the
I
data.
have a ton for you to read then.
Just send me the data rather than like
Good.
just tell me what it
Good.
is, because I work with
Okay.
multiple people who work with sexual violence victims. I've spoken with cops
And
in the
I
sex violence
and
department.
I
And so
counseled
this idea that
and I counseled rape victims for 5 years, and let me
okay,
tell you, it was horrible for all of them. Every
I'm
single
sure it
one of them.
was. Okay, Anna,
I don't
I
think there's
have
any
also been a
pro-rape
rape
people on
victim.
the
There's
panel,
nothing
right?
here about me trying to say that rape is good and victims don't suffer. I also have
You're
been a rape victim.
dismissing.
I am not at all dismissing it, and it's
You
frustrating to me
are.
to act like I am. Okay. What I am saying is that the narrative has absolutely shifted, and there is a serious problem. I've worked with tons of rape victims as well. I have also now worked with multiple clients who, as they came out of their addiction, fully owned that they had made a false allegation, and we had to go to the courts together to work through that situation because an innocent individual was incarcerated presently. So the fact that these things don't happen isn't true. Is it the case that more women are probably still sexually assaulted than are false allegations? I fucking hope so. But there are going to inevitably be bad actors, and they're socially incentivized to do so because of the believe victim mantra.
Well, of course they're gonna. If they're addicts, are gonna have had false accusations. There's tons of
Oh,
cluster
that
B
was such a
personality disorders
horrible statement to
there.
make. Oh my god. Sorry. I shouldn't
What?
have said
I
that.
mean, we all know this is kind of true. I mean, you have the high
Hold on,
prevalence
we
of
should
certain
stop. Wait, chill. You
personalities
can't just
there.
say that you can't believe an addict's rape statement.
I'm
Because
not
people
saying
that are
that. I'm saying,
addicted,
of
you
course, that's
literally.
where you're gonna find the false allegations.
Okay, so
People
you're
get
there would know more than me
taken
about this, but I'm
advantage
pretty sure that people that are addicted to drugs are some of the people, or people that are like in sex work. These are the types of people that have the most trouble being taken seriously because of statements like what you just said. Like, oh, they're a fucking druggie, they're probably making it up, or like, oh, they do
Yeah, I
prostitution,
didn't
they're probably
say
making it up.
that though. I'm saying that that's, of course, you're gonna probably find more in that population. Yeah, that's because of the
Okay.
personality correlates that go along with that population.
Okay, so let me ask a question
you're
real
not
quick.
you're not saying that you can't trust what they're saying
No.
because they're an addict. You are saying that, well, of course there's going to be a high population of people lying about it because they're addicts.
That's a dunk. You're trying to dunk. It's okay. We've already gotten past that. So let me ask, Anna, do you think?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, good. Anna, do you think that there's an underreporting of male sex assault victims? Do you think that there's an
Well,
underreporting of that? Or do
The
you think that,
empirical data supports that there's an underreporting for women and men. More so men, but there's still for women as well.
sure. So then you
Because
would
our
say,
culture is still extremely hostile to female victims
But
that
less than
come
it
out.
used to be.
Yeah, less than it used to be, but
That's
it's
all we're
still
saying. That's all
really
anybody here has been
prevalent.
saying, I think.
Yeah, that was my
Okay.
whole point.
That's
That was-
okay.
That was nobody
No,
was
that's not what you've been
disagreeing.
saying.
Yes.
Nobody was disagreeing with the fact that like rape culture is a thing. It is specifically that things are less harsh than they used to be.
You're making it sound like now things have been completely flipped and that, oh my gosh, all
Nobody's
these men,
saying
these
that.
poor
No
men,
one
all
has
these
said
false
that.
rape accusations,
No
and
one
that's
one
not
is saying
true.
that.
it's okay.
Everyone
think
has
it's a
agreed
person
of the
here who
direction
said
of the
that.
data. Everyone has agreed with the direction of the data. Like no one's questioning that.
It's okay. So it's all right. So there was a miscommunication. It seems like now that
No,
there's
there was no miscommunication.
Sure, it's okay. I'm sorry. There's a misunderstanding. That's
Thank
what I
you.
mean. A misunderstanding, and so therefore it seemed like everybody was coming to. Some people were not fully trying my best. Jesus. So it sounds like now
There's
at least we're on
still
the
a
same
huge
page. Then
issue.
wait, hold on,
There's
Anna.
still a huge issue
Anna,
here.
it sounds like now that we are on the same page at least. So then it does seem like everyone here does believe that rape culture to some degree does exist, right?
No,
Okay, wait.
what does
Here's
that
like
mean?
here's a
To
few
some
statements
degree.
I think everyone here agrees on. Okay, one, the rape culture, whatever we want to call it today, is better than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Two, there are still problems. Okay. Three, women have an easier time coming out today than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. But four, there are still problems with them coming out where they get a lot of pushback. Five, there are some very small percentage of rape accusations that are fake. Six, people are still a little bit too cautious around most accusations because they don't recognize that that's a very small percentage of the overall amount of accusations, right? I think everybody here agrees with all of these statements.
Yeah, I think we agree with like the facts. The question is
Okay.
just whether or not we label it rape culture, right? I think that's where the disagreement is.
I don't care what you want to label it as.
Well, but that's kind of important because like
Yeah.
something that Tav said earlier is that like, so I gave like my second definition of rape culture, which is one where like men are expected to be the pursuers and women are like the gatekeepers. I think this leads to like a kind of like, I'll say like a rapey culture, but like maybe rape isn't the best word for it. And when you give people that impression, you get a lot of people that think that some behaviors are okay because they're not like rape, when they are kind of like rapey, or when we should have like another word, they're predatory, I should say.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the use of like more extreme words can be agitative and beneficial for movement it sometimes, but I think in this case specifically, it's actually removing some of the nuance because, like Destiny said, there's a lot of men who are going to do things like that are kind of pushy, but they're like, but it's not rape. And you're like, yeah, it's not rape, but it's also pushing boundaries, which is really inappropriate as well, right? And they're like, well, it's just not rape. And then we keep saying in rape culture, just tell men not to rape. And it's like, this isn't helpful to literally any party involved. Like, that's why I don't love the label rape culture myself, because I think it actually like reduces the quality of conversations that can be had, which I think is actually leading to more victimization, not less.
And
I think you need to
Oh.
consider like the contextualization, or you have to contextualize it properly. Like Destiny was saying about the inception of the Me Too movement and whatnot. We're talking about like, Hollywood producers. We're talking about really high up guys that, had wealth or had class or had prestige that were able to escape the system. And I think because there was not a great transition of that into like more of a public sphere where it's like people at your high school, I think there is a lot of people who, get pushy. And that's not to defend that, but it is to say that they're not like serial rapists. But I think that the movement has had trouble distinguishing the calibers of dealing with, problematic behavior. And if you can't do that, then I don't think you'll be able to address the issue. And that's why I think like that Me Too movement that's spread into society now is the biggest enemy of women speaking up about issues, because then there's going to be that reactionary counter push of like, well, it's like none of the accusations are true and, everybody's lying and they'll just say that anyway.
No, that's just misogyny. That's ridiculous. That's misogyny. Anyway,
okay.
I posted a study that proved my fucking point in the Discord, and you all should probably read it, on how people do still disbelieve and blame women for their own
No one
rape,
is saying that people
despite
don't.
the
It's
Me
whether or
Too
not-
era.
It's whether or
So
not it's gotten better. That we all agree that it's gotten better, right? Or do you not agree with that?
no, I don't. I think I don't agree with that. I don't see how it's gotten better. Women are still accused of
If it
false
hasn't gotten
rape
better,
accusations.
What do we say about like the powerful figures that have been held accountable now that hadn't in the past, right? Whereas in the past, somebody like Roman Polanski or whatever would be getting like applauses from people in Hollywood, but now we see major producers and actors and like A-list actors getting called out. How can we say the culture hasn't changed?
Because one guy went to prison.
Not just
That
one
didn't do
guy. There have been
anything.
several actors
So,
that have
so
gotten
Anna,
like
Women
just
are
5
still
minutes
accused
ago-
of false rape accusations.
No,
They're
we
still
agree
accused
with
of
that.
lying.
just
Okay,
5
can I
minutes ago,
clear
Anna,
something up really
you
quickly,
yourself
please?
said
I just want to clear up really
Sorry.
quickly. First, Roman Polanski didn't get put in prison. It's just that at this point he's been banned from the Oscars for the last.
Wait, hold on, whoa. I never
Exactly
said.
my
I never
point.
said. No, wait. I never said he got put in prison. I'm just saying that like a while ago, it felt like there were a lot of people in Hollywood that would still cover for him or support him.
Yeah.
Whereas if we look to today, like the culture and people like Spacey or Weinstein or like other actors that have been called out, now that doesn't seem to be the case as today. That there's as much cover provided for these people as there used to be.
That was what I was
think-
going to describe really quickly. Is that
So-
specifically after they had been accused, like Roman Polanski literally admitted to the 13-year-old relationship with the 13-year-old, and then he continued to work with the Oscars. They were literally Skyping him in when he won in like 2001 and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was
but then
fucked, yeah.
recently in 2017, they finally banned him from it. They did the same thing with Harvey Weinstein. They did the same thing, I think, with Woody Allen and so on and so forth. So now there has been a cultural shift, and that they are now like taking stances to make sure that they actually ban people who are like convicted of sexual assault and things like that.
Anna,
And
you
just to
5 minutes
acknowledge is that
ago.
there's like a lot of people who don't believe women, and like the predominant, maybe even the predominant narrative is that like you shouldn't believe women, and that you should be like very skeptical about rape accusations. Like
Yeah,
I can acknowledge that like
yeah.
a lot of rape accusations, aren't treated, with the respect that they should be. But I think that we, on the same turn, we also have to acknowledge that there is a culture of people who also just believe in believing all women automatically. And that's not the appropriate solution. At least I don't think it is the appropriate solution.
I think that's just a fringe minority of feminists, though, that think
I
that
don't
way.
think so. No, because I mean, and you can look at just like Twitter, right? Or like there's so many instances of this where there will be someone who's like accused of something, whether it be like Aziz Ansari or Dream, the Minecraft YouTuber, who is like accused of like bad interactions with people. And then you dig into the story and it's like a complete nothing burger. But then there are people who like don't take them seriously, and are not able or not willing to talk to them at all from that point going forward. And that's problematic, that we exist in like this culture that is hungry constantly for drama and for accusing people of things.
I
And
agree.
it eats people up. And then
But I think
no
that's
good comes
cancel.
of it.
I think that's cancel culture, though, isn't it? And I think that like there's a difference between like cancel culture, and then the fact that most rapes are still not going prosecuted in the criminal justice system, because I care most about the criminal justice
Yeah.
system
Wait,
and getting more
Yeah,
prosecution.
yeah.
what do
And I
you
think we should like
what do you think is
uh,
the, if I can just like get the framing, what do you think is like the tangible difference between cancel culture and like the Me Too movement or like the anti-rape culture movement?
I mean, isn't the difference that like they were actually complaining about, a real issue with like systemic injustice with they were
I think
complaining about rape
people could
culture.
make the case that they do that when they're trying to cancel certain people.
April?
I mean, I think we need to distinguish between like the vast majority of sexual assault and rape, which isn't something that's called out like publicly, that you don't have massive Twitter threads on. That's the majority of rape and sexual assault. And so if you're interested in like really changing the majority of rape and sexual assault, we can talk about the Me Too movement and cancel culture and these big figures. And I feel like that's kind of a different scenario than like the majority of rape and sexual assault. So maybe, if I can give Anna like a slight bit of credit here, even if it's true that like you have these like cancel culture events where people are like held accountable or where people are falsely accused, that is still representing like a tiny minority of the amount of times people are either being falsely accused or being legitimately sexually assaulted. So these are kind of two separate issues here.
Well, false accusations of sexual assault and rape are very rare. So, yeah.
I guess I
Yeah.
would ask
Also, real
Anna,
quick, hold
do
on.
you,
Just I just want to real quick. So you cited this study. This study doesn't say anything about how like it's like a study on rape culture or not. This is just a study showing like what effects you can report on or what things you report on that will influence the
Yes.
reporting or adjudication of a rape case. This doesn't
Right,
this doesn't say
exactly.
anything about whether
That's rape
anything's gotten
culture.
worse. No.
Wait,
This
what
doesn't say
were
about
It's
whether
a current study.
no
It's
hold
from
on.
Anna, what were we
I'm just
supposed to
explaining.
get from the study?
Yeah, I'm just saying that all
I'm
this
supposed
study
to
says.
see that what I'm saying is right.
Well, like
that
what
I
part
all
of
this
what
is,
part
all
of
this
what you're
is
saying?
saying is that if you report on certain things, like the incident location, the sexual history of somebody, or relationship with somebody,
Right.
that you're less likely to get good adjudication. But if you report on other things, like relating to the socioeconomic status of the perpetrator,
Right.
or things like this, that these don't have. This isn't saying whether or not rape culture has gotten better or worse, or even to what extent it exists.
It's
This is
showing
just
that rape
how
culture
people-
is still fully
No,
active.
this is just showing. This is just
Yes, it
showing how
is.
people adjudicate cases. That's what this study is about. Just as a heads up. Okay.
Yeah, that's rape culture.
Would you say that we have a crime culture if there are people that are less likely to acquit or not acquit based on like the
No,
characteristics?
because
of how
this is
something
based on misogyny. It's just
No, this isn't based on misogyny.
Yes,
No,
it
hold on,
is.
wait, hold on. Your own study contradicts that because in this very study it says that male cases were less likely to be believed than female cases. So that implies misandry more than anything else.
I mean, we do know that is a problem, though.
It might be, but you don't have data to show that. Your study showed me that there's a less incidence of believing male rape victims, and this is just showing the difference between how people adjudicate cases based on what's reported.
Right. It's just like why we have rape shield laws where criminal justice attorneys are not allowed to invoke the fact that, a victim has been like sexually promiscuous or something because, the rape case is never going to get prosecuted then. You're screwed. Like there's no way a rape victim is going to get justice.
That shows that's a good thing. That shows that we're taking into account studies like this by not reporting on those things because that will affect the adjudication of those cases.
Anna, do you
Right.
know when that policy was enacted? Like when did the policy come into place that you couldn't talk about like a woman's promiscuity in the case of like a sexual assault? Do you know when that policy was made?
I think that was in the 90s.
Okay, so
I
you
mean,
could
it
argue
doesn't
that at
matter
least in the
because
last 30 years,
criminal
like it's gotten better because of that policy alone. And I would agree, there's a
doesn't
huge
matter.
problem. Like you and I would probably fully agree, there are absolutely problems in the processing and persecution of rape. Not
Cops are
all of
really
them.
bad about it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some huge problems. And the problem is that not all of them are actually like things that humans can control. For example, like things like
Yeah.
rape kits and stuff like that. Lots of
Yeah,
them
there's
don't get processed. So we
backlog.
could fix that. But there's a lot of cases where in rape, a woman might not come forward until 4 to 5 days later. So there's no evidence to be collected. And then you have just a really weak case to try. And it's really hard to push anything because it comes down to a lot of time he said, she said, which are really, really difficult cases. And this isn't to be like blaming the victim. It means that like there are instances where like the judicial system is failing victims and failing overall the system, that are wholly benign and just inherent to the nature of the forensic evidence that we can utilize right now. Like if somebody doesn't leave evidence, it's really, really hard to prove rape cases without like video evidence or like multiple witnesses. Like it's really, really hard to try these things and have them actually go to
Well,
a guilty verdict, which
well,
is
yeah,
super sad. But that doesn't mean that there's like this sinister system at play. It means that like
no, I'm not saying
there's
there is, but there's still underlying misogyny because people are still assuming that false rape allegations are that prominent.
That
And
the
there's still
assumption
things that we
is
can do to fix the criminal justice system, and plenty of scholars have plenty of suggestions on this. I've read so many studies on this and
wait,
what
what's
they're
what's
doing.
one thing that could improve that?
Making rape myth acceptance less
No, hold on. In a
less
court of law, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. What's one thing that could alleviate that? If somebody doesn't turn in a rape kit, what's
you
one
could
thing?
have someone like what I want to be an expert witness appeal and explain to the jury on trauma reactions and typical
That's
of
not
rape
good enough.
victims.
That's not
It
beyond a
is.
reasonable doubt that a crime has occurred.
It doesn't matter. That still helps the jury
It
to
doesn't help at all. All
understand.
you'd have to do
Yes,
is
it
bring in one
does.
expert witness that shows that trauma reactions can develop from things that aren't even traumatic, or that traumatic people are less likely to
That's
recall
not
events accurately.
or you could develop traumas based on
that's
no
not
experience
true
at all, but
though.
you
Yeah,
can just be
exactly.
led to
That's
have a
that's
belief,
like
which you
some of the
can
least
prove.
reliable evidence.
Well, that's not true because that only happens with therapists and not with like random people.
It could
I
happen
mean,
with a
don't
team of
know.
lawyers or with parents that are talking. Of course, it could, right? This could develop. It doesn't only happen with therapists. Tons of people can instill bad memories or false thoughts or whatever in you.
Most of
depending
the
on
studies
the
were
No,
done by
that's
just
not
random
real.
research
That's not
psychologists, not even
true.
counseling. Most of the studies of false memories has actually been done by like forensic units, like so more like forensic psychologists and then just research psychologists. And as you would know,
Yeah,
a research psychologist isn't a therapist, and they're not usually trained in therapy at all. They're usually trained in statistics and all the boring shit, right?
you're using it out of context, though. It bears no context to this, and it's being used in bad
Well, you're
faith.
trying to say that only therapists can create false memories of a trauma, but we're
That's what
saying, well,
most of the
that's
false
not necessarily
memories.
true at all. Like if anyone just has the process figured out, anyone could create a false memory if they just replicate what the therapists sometimes do, right? So the idea of like we could get an expert witness to defend the victim, you can get an expert witness to dismiss the victim. That's why an expert witness won't actually solve the problem of persecuting sexual assault better.
So let me ask you guys
Well,
a question real
why do they
quickly.
use expert witnesses then? Why do they
Expert
use
witnesses
them
are
then?
used to build on
Also,
top of
you
other
can't
types of
just claim
circumstantial evidence.
you can't just claim that anyone can create a false memory. That's not true.
That is true.
Okay,
Period.
well,
No,
listen.
it's not true. Where is the data that supports this? You can't just make claims out of your ass.
So then here's another question,
If
you
you
guys,
don't have a
and I think this is
degree,
like
you
actually
can't
like related to
cause
the
false
conversation at
memories.
hand. Do you guys believe that it's possible? Do you guys believe, given the things that you guys are talking about, describing the fact that sexual assault is like less likely to have forensic evidence and things like that? Do you think that there should be some sort of different burden of proof regarding sexual assault cases
No.
than?
Yes.
Of course not.
Why
Our
not?
justice system is constructed around the concept of innocent until proven guilty. You can't suspend that just for some types of cases. That's ridiculous. It would completely break.
There's
I think
plenty of
that's the
things
part
to
we've
do.
been moving to. That's like kind of the tough part of this conversation is that there's a lot that we do, and there's also a lot that we simply can't do something about. If somebody
Yeah.
does not get like a rape kit, and if there's not a lot of evidence, the uncomfortable truth of the matter is that it's really tough to do something about this. And I think because it's tough to do something about it without a rape kit or something else, I'd see the response, or rather the response I have seen is that people will then go to, trying to take this to like a school, or they'll make it like a social push. And there, the validity of certain accusations is even less convincing to people. And I think in that circumstance, that's when you get most of the like, oh, it's a false accusation, like I'm not going to take it seriously, that kind of culture.
And it should
Not
be hard,
justified.
as much as it sucks. Like it should be hard to get a rape or like a murder or an assault conviction on somebody. Like these are really big charges from the state, and you want them to have like a high burden of proof to convict somebody of it. That's how our legal system is designed.
Stardust?
There's some things
These
that
are
you can
these are very heavy accusations that taint somebody's life for a very long time, if not for the entirety of their life afterwards. And as much as I empathize with the victims of assault and rape and all of these things, the best thing that I think we can do is educate people to know what to do after they've encountered or had an experience like this, right? Like getting a rape kit done, not taking a shower after something's happened to you, right? Rather than changing the amount of evidence that we require for somebody to be considered guilty.
Anna, you disagreed with that. You think we should change the burden of proof?
Well, I think we could change the criminal justice system, and plenty of researchers have been talking about doing this. Plenty of
Wait,
law
change it how?
I mean, like with the rape shield laws, things like that don't allow
that's the thing
criminal
that's already
justice
done.
attorneys
We
to
just
do
said-
that. No, there's still plenty of problems because criminal justice attorneys, and I saw this when I worked with rape victims, they can still like, you know, insinuate that a victim was maybe a slut or something, or like, you know, they worked as a sex
My
worker.
understanding is looking at how court cases have gone in the United States. I don't know the legal terms for this. If a lawyer wants to chime in or whatever in my chat or something. My understanding is that you can't bring prior character evidence to a court to get a conviction on somebody of something like that. Like this is what they
You
try
can
to do.
still
For
let
instance,
it
in the
slip.
you can't let it. You'll get called out for a mistrial. Like if
Yeah.
you do that as a prosecutor, you could get fucked and lose the whole case. My understanding is if you try to bring
Doesn't.
forth, it literally has happened in court cases before. I don't know why you're saying it doesn't. Like
Okay, because it doesn't.
oh well.
Do you
never
have-
mind, I lose.
do you have any
I
evidence for this
retract my
claim?
entire claim.
Like,
because
didn't
Oh,
this
so now
happen-
we can
thi-
ask
this
for
happened
evidence
during
of
the
claims?
this
Wait.
happened
Now we
during the
can
rape
ask
Hold on,
for
trial.
hold on.
evidence of
Asking for
Wait.
evidence from everybody else. I think it's fair that people can
Wait.
ask you for an
This
evidence.
isn't-
Well,
but-
then where's the evidence from everyone else,
Okay,
Star?
so this isn't an evidentiary based claim. It was more of an intuitive claim. No, not just
No,
intuitive.
this
No,
isn't
no.
intuitive.
I was
This is
correcting
the
it. I was correcting it.
Okay,
Not
okay.
intuitive. It's actually something that like we've actually seen happen. But it's okay. If Anna's not willing to accept that, then just move on past the evidence part.
Well, but it's important
Before
because
studying.
typically you're not allowed to do like character assassination things in a courtroom if it's not directly
but-
relevant to the case.
But they can still insinuate a victim was like a slut or something, and like a jury will still get that.
then
like,
the
they
job
will
is on
still
the
hear
defense. Then the job is on the defense to call that out.
Which they would, because that would
Yeah,
potentially
you
give
could
them
get
a
a
mistrial, which would
Yeah.
be great for them. So like courts
I mean,
are really, really, really
It
well
happened with the
controlled.
Brock Turner case.
If you're going into this field though, Anna, you know that court systems are really well controlled and they're very tight about what is permissible or not because you have a defense and a prosecutor. And so if you do something that violates like trial rules, they'll just call a mistrial because that's what the defense job is. So like I don't
know.
know.
What I'm saying, I mean,
Okay.
this happened in literally the Brock Turner case, Erudite. So what the fuck about that? Stop acting like I'm dumb or something. I
Okay.
don't know what I'm talking about.
Anna, you're getting a little antsy again. Do you need
Well,
some time?
like-
I don't care why.
I mean,
Stop.
people are trying to discredit me, and here
People
I
are
am, like I'm
disagreeing
in.
with you, and it's okay.
No, they're trying to discredit me.
Not
Okay.
discrediting, it's just disagreeing.
It doesn't matter. Whatever they're doing, we're gonna do it
Wait, hold on.
civilly
Just,
and
I want to be
responsibly.
clear.
Okay, well, what about
I
the
just wanna be
Brock
clear real
Turner
quick.
case
When we
then?
when we say the Brock Turner case, right? Are you talking about the character of an accuser or the character of a defendant?
The victim, not the
The victim.
accuser. The victim
Yeah,
Bill
the-
of Rights means that you call them victims in the court system.
I think that depends sometimes, but
No, it
maybe
doesn't depend.
It absolutely depends.
No,
because some,
it doesn't.
Okay, so for some, at least in looking over the Rittenhouse stuff, there are some judges that won't let you call certain people victims because that charges the jury to hear people as like,
It
okay, well,
violates
they're
the
vic-
victim's Bill of Rights. That
Okay,
judge
I don't know
was
what the- I don't
violating
know-
the victim's Bill of Rights.
Okay, okay. Brock Turner was convicted, wasn't he? Wasn't he found guilty?
Yeah, for like 6 months.
Okay.
So we can definitely talk about like length of persecution, but even in the case of Brock Turner, he was found guilty. So I'm not, I don't know.
But his defense, but his attorney was able to still insinuate that the victim was like, had like a drinking issue and stuff. And he still was able to, assassinate her character. That's what I'm saying. That still happens. These are still issues that need to be addressed in the criminal justice system.
What is the legal drinking? Is it 0.08?
I think it depends.
I think it depends on your state. I
Yeah.
think
Also-
in my province it's 0.5.
Okay, hold on. I just want to
Utah
Also,
does as well.
there-
wait.
Wait.
I want to say this. I want to be really clear here, okay? Just because it's important, right? So for stuff that's evidentiary in a court of law, you can't bring up prior misconduct to try to assassinate somebody's current character unless it's incredibly relevant to what's being talked about. Like they made a statement about like, I'm going to kill, I'm going to rape, I'm going to do something. So I haven't looked at any of the specifics for the Brock Turner case, okay? But now when I'm reading this, Emily Doe, I'm assuming is one of the accusers, when she was tested at the hospital, her blood alcohol content was 0.12%. And it sounds like the doctors estimated at the time of the assault, it would have been 0.242 or 0.249%. So if this is the case, then it makes sense why alcohol was brought up, because it seemed to be directly relevant to a factor relating to the rape.
It was a character assassination.
No, that's not a character.
No, it was in her
assassination.
defense.
That is absolutely not a character assassination.
No,
if I'm going to be
because
accused of
that's not
something
what I'm
and the person was
saying.
highly drunk at the time it
Yeah,
happened, that's going to
okay,
be relevant to the
stop
court
it.
case, of
That
course.
probably helped in the guilty verdict. If you're that inebriated, how do you consent? You're probably
Yeah,
blacked out.
exactly. But I'm saying that
Not
the
a character
attorney
assassination. That's a
did.
defense.
No, I'm not saying that's what the defense was. For fuck's sake.
Okay, Anna.
I'm saying that
Anna.
the defense
Anna.
attorney still did character
Okay.
assassinate her.
Okay, Anna.
Okay, Erudite, you're like really disappointing me, honestly.
Okay,
Like,
Anna,
I
you're
don't even
you're disappointing me a lot more. Look. This is literally
you're
this is literally the final warning I can give you. I need you to be civil. If this is too charged for you, because I get it, being dogpiled can hurt and it can be whatever. This is too charged for you, then maybe we need to remove you from the situation. This is the last warning I'm going to give you. Okay?
All right.
Please continue on with the conversation.
I don't quite remember where we were at.
I was trying to say that that's not the character assassination I was talking about, and you kept trying to strawman me, and I don't appreciate that.
Which
Okay.
character
don't do it
assassination
anymore.
were you talking about?
Where the defense attorney insinuated that she had a drinking problem, not that she was very drunk. It's the fact that he insinuated she had a drinking problem.
Well,
So don't strawman me anymore.
That probably wasn't admissed. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there was like a follow-up, but that was probably not deemed super relevant, especially if the thing at the end of if the argument being made by the defense is like, yeah, she her intoxication level is way above being able to give consent, and that aids in like the correct verdict. I mean, I don't know. I think that
It
comes
still
down
doesn't
to the
justify
lawyer.
a character assassination.
Well, but character assassinations can happen in any courtroom ever. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that it occurs as well.
No,
in,
there's no
rape cases.
justification. No,
Okay,
there's
can
no
we-
justification for it.
Anna, can you tell
It's
us
not okay.
what is the character assassination that you're referring to?
The defense attorney insinuated that the victim maybe had a drinking problem, and that's why she shouldn't be credible. And this happens all the time in rape cases, which is part of rape culture.
No, I think it happens in like
There's
a
plenty
lot
of empirical
cases,
data
though.
on this.
When I
But
think
it's
of rape,
worse in a rape case.
Is
when I think of
is it
when I-
not relevant?
Wait, hold on.
Like,
Start us first, because she was going in April.
well, I think April should go first because I'm probably going to bring up
Okay,
something
then April, go ahead.
adjacent.
I mean, you do need to establish credibility if someone's making an accusation. If there's reason to believe that someone's like not a credible accuser, if they have ulterior motives or are like unable to actually make the accusation, if someone like physically was not able to witness something occurring or perceive the sexual assault, and then they're like told later by their friends, and I'm not saying this is what happens in this circumstance because it was like an actual conviction in this case, but we can imagine that someone is just like told, yeah, you were assaulted, or they're convinced that they're assaulted after the fact. That's a really big problem. And you do need to establish in court that someone's actually able to make the accusation, on good conscience, credibly. So, to an extent, like character assassination is bad, but like you do need to establish that someone's a credible accuser in the first place.
Also, I don't think the Victim's Bill of Rights says you have to be referred to as a victim in court. I don't know where that comes from.
So,
Reading that, yeah.
when I think of rape culture, I don't think of my what I would say is the most like, or one of the more harmful parts of rape culture would be like immediately after an assault or something like that. It's not about like when they go to court, right? It's when somebody goes to authorities or something like that, right? When somebody goes to somebody they trust and tells them what happened, and everything around that is scrutinized. That's when I think is like the most like harmful part of rape culture. That's what I would say. I don't know where I was going with this. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet now.
Well, I mean, at least you tried. So listen, I guess I feel like we're kind of nearing the end of the conversation. I don't really feel like I don't know. I don't really think there's very much more to like milk out of the conversation. Is there anything else that anybody feels like is kind of poignant that they feel like needs to be stated?
Something that was said earlier that I think is really important is one of the reasons why it's so important to turn the temperature down on the way that we talk about this shit instead of every action being rape is that it's really hard for some people to come to terms with past negative actions they've done if they feel like they have to frame it through the most hyperbolic fucking words ever. Like with the current definitions and the current way that we approach rape, almost every single like encounter between two teenagers is probably involving some level of rape because teenagers are dumb, because it happens, because people aren't thinking. But to call it all rape makes it impossible for somebody to ever view a prior action through some sort of like introspective lens because they're worried that by entertaining the thought, they have to like brand themselves a rapist, which is another reason why I think it's good to like turn the language down on some of these things we talk about.
This
Yeah,
is
I'll
exactly correct. And that's what I brought up initially. Like, I think we need to acknowledge that we have like a problem with casual sex and the casual sex culture. And recenter the language. So we're really identifying like what's the problem here, and why people are getting in these circumstances in the first place.
Well, it's not just that, like throughout like the last like 50 years, I think most of the people who have had sex by today's standards would either be considered, not going into it, exercising, proper descriptions of consent, or they are just like straight up rapists because they didn't ask for consent. And I think that's kind of like the terminally online thing that's infected this discourse is like, the way people describe consent now is not the way that people ever described it. And that doesn't mean that every person who had sex was a rapist. It means that, right now, because of like the heat of this conversation, we have to think differently about consent. And I would argue that that's not normal. I wouldn't make a claim as to whether it's better or not, because I don't know if there's like a significant uptick or downtick in the amount of rape cases, but it's just simply not how relationships have been had. Like if you told your grandpa that, before you kissed your girlfriend on like your second date, you asked her if you could kiss her, he'd be like, what are you, like stupid? And he'd like smack you or something. So I think that this discourse has certainly changed the way we look about consent, but I haven't seen whether that's like a clear all the way good thing or not. I think it's just now making people way more conscious about every action. Like Destiny said, now it's hyperbolic too. Like nobody wants to admit to being a rapist, and nobody wants to admit to themselves that they were raped. Sometimes people do want to admit that, and then they come off, too quick in admitting that because they've got a different, frame of reference after their interactions with somebody are like put through the lens of them being like an abuser or something. But those are my 2 cents.
Yeah,
I think you see that. Oh, talk on.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't know if I'd be willing to say like it's a casual sex culture problem. I would say like we've kind of jumped from like one puritanical view of sex to almost it seems like another, but there's still like not actually a lot of nuance about conversation. Like I think whether you want to have like traditional sexual roles or casual sexual roles, I think is actually pretty neutral. The problem is that like our social landscape hasn't actually evolved to deal with this, right? We don't really have like actual meaningful conversations about consent or about like implied consent and misunderstood consent or consent when you are inebriated, like all sorts of things that lead to like really dicey situations. And so like is it a casual sex problem? I would say it's more of like a lack of social conversation, which is why like these like really hyperbolic of like, yeah, but rape is bad and like we need to just believe victims is like super super damaging to the conversation because we just can't get anywhere. And it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just leads to like circling around kind of the same talking points without any actual like measurable solutions of like, okay, well, like what is good sex education? Like what does consent actually look like? Like what are the cues that you're explicitly looking for? How do you convey your consent well? Like all sorts of things. There's just like there's no space for the conversation because we just want to say like rape is bad and like we should like care about victims. And it's like both of those things are obviously true, but can we go beyond that?
Okay, then I have another question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anna. Go ahead.
I wanted to say that empirical data also shows that most victims of rape don't recognize also that they've been raped because even though what happened to them meets the legal definition of rape. So that's another problem that we have with rape culture, is that so many people don't think what happened to them is rape. They're too scared to label it as rape. So that's a really big issue too. Also, another issue is that rape kits don't really do much because most rapes that occur are date rapes. So rape kits don't always necessarily do all that much, since again, it's like a lot of times it's like your date, it's an acquaintance, a friend, or whatever, and the argument will just be, well, it was consensual. So
Well, the
I
rape
mean,
kit is still essential, though, right?
yeah,
So we shouldn't say rape kits don't do much. A rape kit is literally a necessary precondition to a rape accusation. So I
yeah,
think
it's
rape
it's
kits
just
do.
that
It's
it's
not
just that
sufficient, but it's necessary. But I mean, like that should probably be the case, right? If it's a he said, she said, should that really be enough to make a conviction off of?
yeah,
Well,
I mean,
there's probably legitimate issues that both victims don't realize that they're being raped. I imagine there are perpetrators who don't realize that they have sexually or raped somebody either.
yeah,
Like
very
that's a
common.
huge thing also.
huge,
I
yeah.
think
So
it's very
like
common. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff, which is why when somebody maybe gets accused of rape and they literally don't think they happened, we get into really messy territory where somebody literally thought that they had consent and the other person literally thinks that they didn't give it.
Yes.
And now you're in this weird situation to be like, whoa, now what the fuck? How do we handle this? And I actually don't think the social landscape is dealing with that well.
Yeah, there's also research that shows that when men are drunk, they're more likely to interpret women's like just neutral to flirty actions as consent to sex, which is kind of scary and could also explain a lot of things too.
I think we can
I mean,
acknowledge
just-
also that in a lot of rapes, a lot of people who are on the receiving end don't say anything, don't give verbal communication. That's not their fault,
No,
but
it's not.
but also there are the person who is on the giving end is also not verbally communicating. So there's I could very well see plenty of space there for there to be misinterpretation.
Kids
Yeah, it's
even
called tonic immobility. It's called tonic immobility. It's like 70% of rape victims experience tonic immobility, which means they freeze up. So they don't fight back, they don't say no. It's called tonic immobility, and it significantly predicts post-traumatic stress disorder and severe depression.
it is
after a rape.
really hard to like prevent a rape when you're in the moment.
Yeah.
I think that like, unfortunately, a lot of the language also I think strips women of like agency.
Well,
There's a lot that women can do, and like I had a panel discussion a while back with all women, and one of the things that one of the women on the panel said was that like she has a lot of sex and a lot of relationships with people, and she believes that it's just like it's part and parcel that she's accepting that if she has a lot of sex with people, she's going to be sexually assaulted. Which I think that's pretty scary. And a lot of people on the panel ended up agreeing with that and saying that like, yeah, like I also engage in frequent casual sex, and I've just accepted that like, you know, when I do that, I'm going to be in positions where I'm compromised and sexually assaulted. That's scary, frankly. But I think that like when we talk about rape culture, we also need to like accept that there's a lot women can do to like make sure they're putting themselves in positions where they're not going to be, you know, at risk for being sexually assaulted.
This is one thing where I deviate from probably every single one of you on, well, one of the many places, but within this conversation, I think one of the biggest things we can do to improve like the arguments or like the idea of whether rape culture exists or not is kind of gatekeep when sexual intimacy occurs and make that something that's socially normal. Like, obviously I'm a Christian. I'm not having sex till I'm married. And not only do I think that's, you know, a great thing because then it makes, you know, a romantic occasion more special. It makes it something unique to the partner and something that's kind of bound by marriage, but it also makes it so that, you know, I'm getting a character established. Like I've had accusations thrown up against me before, but because people know that like I'm a very celibate individual, like I don't go off, you know, kissing strangers in parking lots because they understand my character. they're less prone to believe the accusations against me. And that's something that I think men need to do better at. A lot of men are surprised that people believe accusations against them, but they live lives that are only conducive to those accusations being true. So that's basically what I would say. I think if people didn't have sex till they were married, this problem would largely go away. Of course, rapists will still exist, but
It
I
would be
think there's
different
so
for
much
sure.
less of a middle ground, right?
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely. I think that like a lot of the ways that you approach sex can put you in more danger for being sexually assaulted. And frankly, like a lot of people are not responsible enough to like engage in sex in a casual way that's not putting them, at risk. There's people who are able to do that and are able to engage in casual sex safely. But I think for a lot of people, it's really dangerous because they're not able to speak up for themselves or set boundaries. And so, like, the reason why we have certain cultural rules about engaging in sex and the reason we put up these boundaries is because I think we know or have known for generations that, like, it is incredibly dangerous unless it's highly controlled. And there is a lot of like marital rape as well. So I think that like on the other end of that, there's a lot of danger in like traditional modes of approaching sex as well, but it's a different kind of danger. And it's a danger that a lot of times we know more about and can address in different ways.
I'd actually wonder if we know less about intimate partner violence. Like we know a lot about like demographics and statistics, but it feels like we actually know very little about what to do about it, right? Like when it comes to casual sexual encounters and being like assaulted by an acquaintance that maybe you just met like a couple hours ago, those are actually the lower stats. And it seems like it's actually, Anna, this is probably something you and I can agree on. There are certain things that we can like advise women to keep themselves safe, and certain things that
Yeah.
we'd recommend if we also know that they maybe have a trauma history, but they're also interested in engaging in sex, right? And so
Yeah.
like we actually have education about that, but most of the sexual assault is coming dominantly from intimate partner relationships, right? And
Yeah.
I don't really know what we do about this, right? Like sure, we can educate people about tonic immobility and like the freeze response during sex and stuff like that, but that seems to probably be more beneficial when you're having more casual relationships with people that you don't know, right? I imagine in most cases, I'd hope at least that if tonic immobility is happening in an intimate partner situation, that these two are speaking about it. And so like we can maybe do
Yeah.
education of like if that's happening, how do you talk to your partner about it? But I don't know. I actually feel like as a culture, we really don't know how to deal with intimate partner violence. And like I would say when Evan was saying like there's people who don't know that they've been raped, I'd say most of the cases when I've come across that, it's been people who have been in a sexual assault situation with an intimate partner. And they have a hard time labeling it as like sexual violence because they
Yeah.
also have like a strong emotional connection and a warm regard for this person, right? And so it leaves them with a lot of cognitive dissonance and they're kind of like, how do I make these two things make sense?
I don't think the issue is unique to
Well,
intimate partner violence. I think we just have a really bad understanding of like relationships and boundaries in general. Like anecdotally, when I read like posts where people talk about like, like I don't know what to do about my boyfriend. Like he doesn't wipe his ass, and I don't really like sleeping with him when I read post after post, or someone will be like, I'm not really sure what to say about my husband. He said that my whole family was full of retarded people, and says I'm not allowed to have friends anymore. What do I do? Like I see so many people that there are clear issues going on in this relationship, independent of any sexual assault or whatever, where people just have a bad understanding of like either they've had bad modeling in their life for what a healthy relationship is, or they don't have the tools or the confidence to stand up to their partner, or they just don't know what they themselves deserve. Maybe it's a self-esteem thing. I'm not sure. But I think that in general, we have really big problems navigating relationships or establishing healthy relationships for ourselves collectively. Well, not ourselves, for most people, because I'm good at it. So fuck
I'm
everybody
gonna
else.
make my audience angry for a minute
don't even start.
by counter signaling the incel question again. I think this is something that people often downplay the importance of. Like there is a language to being in relationships, and there's a language that women speak that you need to understand. And a level of interaction with relationships and women is necessary to be fluent in this and to ultimately have a marriage, in my opinion. And people are going to think that's controversial, but I think it goes without saying. You guys probably don't think it's controversial, but my audience is tearing me apart for it right now.
Let me ask you guys a quick question. I know rape culture and all that like has to do with like punishing of sexual assault, but What about now that we've had like the Me Too movement and the fact that like accusations are like a lot more forthcoming, like people are more just willing to do that. What are your thoughts on increasing punishments for false rape accusations?
I think that the punishment for a false accusation should be whatever the punishment is. You have to be wary that if you're like the threshold for what a false accusation is needs to be pretty high. It can't just be like an accusation that didn't win in court, because then you have like a very weird chilling effect on all sorts of accusations. Actually, I don't know if there should be a penalty, like a false accusation penalty. It should just be like whatever lying under oath is, right? Like perjuring yourself, which I think is already illegal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar like cases of malingering, for example, where like somebody fakes brain injury and stuff. Like the level at which we're willing to label something malingering is really, really, really high, and we want it to be beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because especially with the sexual assault, we have this weird thing where somebody might feel sexually assaulted, and the person who they feel perpetrated against them literally was confident that they got consent, right? And so in that case, the court might fall apart and not convict the individual, but the victim shouldn't be now tried as making a false allegation because they might have literally felt assaulted in that situation. And so like I think like there are, like I've said, I've worked with individuals who have fully come out. Usually in those cases, to be honest, how it's played out is the court thanks them, and they go through the steps of basically like amending the statement and releasing the individual, which is like potentially less than maybe should happen. And I would like to believe in this case the court had grace because they were in active addiction when like the claim was made and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think persecuting it is like we'd have to be really, really, really careful.
Well, sure. Like, wouldn't the idea of like persecuting it would need to be a known intentional false accusation? It wouldn't just be something.
Yeah,
like a
there would need to be a
made.
really high threshold. But even so, like it should just be the same as any other false accusation you make. Because to make a false accusation, I think you necessarily perjure yourself, right? That's what a false accusation is. You submit a statement to the court that's a lie, that's knowingly a lie. So I don't know why there would need to be a special perjury for rape versus anything else.
Well,
What if
there's also
someone
like
feels
libel
like
and
they were
slander laws.
what if they feel like they were assaulted? Like that's the big issue, isn't it? Like they might genuinely feel like, then that's not a lie.
And a malingerer might say that they genuinely feel. So like in these cases of perjury, you'd have to have beyond burden of proof of saying, even if you say that you felt this way, you're only saying this to defend your false allegation, right? Like you would need beyond a shadow of a proof to ensure that they knew what they were doing.
You have to know that it's false.
Because there's a
Like a
difference.
confession, something like that, yeah.
Right, yeah. Because there's a difference between someone who genuinely believes it and someone who is lying
And
intentionally.
when it comes to like public figures, there's like an added layer as well. Well, when it comes to like slander laws, we have to actually prove like malicious intent, that you're like actually trying to hurt someone, as well as like knowing that it's false and spreading it to a public platform. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that like the standard should be pretty high for like proving that it's a false accusation.
Do you think our slander laws are high? Do you think like the in order to like prove like slander or libel in court, like the barrier is already really high, right? Like it has to be
it's higher
intentional.
for like public figures.
Only for public figures is it really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are there like a lot of cases of like slander happening against like non-public figures?
Isn't slander
Yeah, of
and defamation?
course.
Isn't that civil shit? So you can just sue whoever the fuck you
Civil.
want.
Yeah, it's civil. It's not a crime. It's
Right.
civil. Civil court.
It's a civil crime. But anyway, but how do you? So you're saying that like.
You just sue someone.
No, I'm saying are you saying that it's commonly happening and there's commonly lawsuits over slander and things like that? It's commonly enforced against
Probably
non-public
thousands of them.
figures?
Yeah, every year. You probably
Yeah.
look them up, yeah.
I guess I'd probably have to look that up. Yeah. So listen, it's been a great conversation, you guys. I sincerely appreciate you guys all for being part of it. This is the Fanatiq panel. The entire purpose here is to have a conversation. Some people are too petulant to be able to do that. That was a passive aggressive dig. Yeah, I did that. But then sometimes you can actually have conversations.
Shout or Mr. Girl? Which one? Or Lauren Southern?
Actually, it was somebody here. But anyway, my point being, this was a great conversation, and I appreciate you guys for being part of it and at least like trying to be civil. I do think that these conversations are like they are kind of hard, and finding people who very firmly believe in rape culture and like are that was a very difficult task, and I was asking around for it, and it was really, really, really difficult. But what I did find is that most people here in this conversation did more or less agree to some degree that like there is pushback against people who come forward with rape accusations. But I think we all can recognize with the advent of the Me Too movement and like the seeming like broader broader media representation for like sex crimes, there does seem to be a shifting in attitude that's happening, and some people feel like it's not happening fast enough, but at the end of the day, it is something that is occurring. Thank you guys all for being here. You can always follow me at twitch.tv/Mr. Fanatiq, where we'll be having a walk-on panel and kind of continuing this discussion on rape culture and so on and so forth. Everyone, we'll start with Anna. Please go ahead and shout yourself out.
Oh yeah, you can find me on twitch.tv/Anavoir.
Alrighty, thank you. Kai Clips.
Yeah, you can find me on cozy.tv/Kai Clips. I think Destiny's about to pass me in followers, so you guys better go follow quick right now. And then on YouTube, just Kai Clips.
Thank you. April.
Yeah, follow me Taftaj, TAFTAJ, on Twitter and Twitch, where I usually stream, or on YouTube if you want to see me talk to notoriously banned, dangerous members like Destiny or Haz or whoever. But yeah, follow me on Twitter if you want to see sexy pictures and occasional political discourse.
Destiny.
Yeah, I'm a staunch anti-rape advocate, Destiny. You can find me at youtube.com/Destiny.
Nasa Erudite.
Yeah, my name's Not So Erudite. You can find me pretty much on most platforms except for Cozy TV by those names. Yeah.
All right, Stardust.
You know, I'm really disappointed that there were no pro-rape advocates on this panel. I feel like we've really missed out on hearing a perspective. I'm just kidding. I'm Stardust. You can find me on Twitch or on YouTube, Stardust Streams.
Thank you. I'm Fanatiq. I'm working my best on trying to like improve the hosting and improving the discourse and making sure that like people are actually able to engage in conversation. I try my best to carefully vet every single person that comes into the channel. Sometimes people can still get past the mark. That's another passive aggressive dig, but ultimately I'm trying my best, and we're going to try our best to improve, including next week. You can listen to my albums under the name Fanatiq on every platform. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see you guys over in Twitch. For those who want to be in the walk-on.
Oh, so I can't be on the walk-on panel, is what you're saying.
Destiny, I am so sorry, but unfortunately you cannot.
You and me are going to do a duo stream,
unclean.
Destiny. We're going to be talking about weightlifting, and it'll be fantastic over on Cozy.
Destiny, you never included the Cosby clip in the rest of the video from our individual conversation in that studio. I need to go ahead and just send that to you, and then maybe you can, or maybe we can go over
August, all right? I don't do any of that shit. All right.
Okay. Yeah, well, I didn't actually upload it yet. That's why. But I'm gonna go ahead and upload that. I need to edit an intro, and I'm just terrible at editing. I'm taking my time, and I'm lazy. But yeah, that's that. Thank you guys sincerely. You know, I'll invite most of you guys back for a future conversation if you guys were willing. And I'm out. Peace.
Have a good one. Thank you for inviting us.
Bye.
Loser.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Listen to me. That was frustrating. That was incredibly frustrating. Listen, I try my best to vet every single person. Like, I literally go out of my way to ensure that everybody's going to be there in good conversation, and sometimes you just can't do it. Anyways, look, we're going to go into this walk-on panel. You guys can join the waiting room of my Discord. You can find that at twitch.tv/Mr. Fanatiq. We're going to have conversations like about this topic, probably go for about an hour. See me in there. And if you would like to be on the Fanatiq panel, we do not care about size. Literally any person can join. Just depending on like if you have some sort of interest or like expertise in the given topic, I will put you on there. I don't care if you have literally 0 followers on Twitter or any of that nonsense. Follow me over at twitch.tv/Mr. Fanatiq. Also, any support that you would like to give, please do so at twitch.tv/Mr. Fanatiq. I appreciate subs and donations and all that other jazz. Yeah, see me over there. Appreciate you guys. I'll be live in about 5 minutes on twitch.tv/Fanatiq. Peace.